Hi there and welcome to Digging Deep. My name is Casey and today I wanted to come and update you on the upcoming Conference of the Parties, or COP as they call it, that will be taking place November 30th through December 12th, 2023. Now I know I'm talking about this a little bit in advance, but they have been planning this meeting since last year. So it is worth talking about now, and then if something new comes from this meeting, I'll do another video to update you, because I think it is important to try to keep up with the people who have been given the power for now to rule the world. So this is a United Nations conference that will be held in Dubai, and it is all about climate change. Last year, I did a video over the COP27, and I'll put a thumbnail up on the screen if you want to check that video out after this one, because I think it is very important for us to know what is going on behind closed doors with these elect groups of people and what they are doing that is affecting the entire globe. Now, my main focus on this channel is Bible study, but I do videos like these because as believers and followers of Jesus Christ, we cannot have our heads buried in the sand. We are literally seeing end-time prophecy come to pass right before our eyes, and we must not be blind to it. So all of you who like joining me for Bible study, I hope that you will stick around for this video, because you might be shocked at how relevant this is to the Bible and Bible prophecy. So before we look at these articles I want to share with you today, please give this video a thumbs up to help others be able to see it. I appreciate all of you that help me by sharing these videos on your social media with your friends and family, because we must know what hour we are living in, right? And if you haven't heard about this upcoming conference, or if you have, but you have learned something new here today, please leave me a comment below and let me know, because I'm always interested in knowing how this content I bring forward is helping all of you. So this first article is just an explanation of where this conference will be. So let's take a look at it. So this article is the COP thematic program, and it states the COP presidency is pleased to share preliminary information on a first set of events planned for the thematic program of COP28 across the 2 weeks of the conference. The events are a product of guidance for a diverse set of stakeholders on the outcomes they would like to see under each thematic day, also reflecting inputs from the open consultation process earlier this year. This draft program will be supplemented with additional events in several tranches over the coming months, including mandated events under the UNFCCC process. As the presidency is looking into maximizing synergies, some event topics may change or be merged. And so this kind of shows you things that they're going to be looking at: governments, youth, business, investors, civilian society, frontline communities, indigenous people, and others. And they're saying they're going to come up with specific solutions that must be scaled up this decade to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, build resilience to mobilize finance at scale. This set of solutions constitutes the response to the global stock take, looking where the world stands on climate action and support identifying the gaps and working together to agree on solution pathways to 2030 and beyond, because they're always talking about 2030, right? And so here on this article, you can go here and you can download their full program, and I'll leave this link in the description of this video if you want to go and look at the full program. Israel has been invited to join the COP28 conference this year, which is interesting considering what has been in the news for a while now about Saudi Arabia wanting security assurances in exchange for being nice to Israel. Let's take a look at this article I found the other day that is from March 9th, 2023. And this article is from the Jewish News Syndicate, and the heading is Saudi Arabia seeks U.S. security assurances in exchange for Israel ties. A Wall Street Journal reports also notes Riyadh wants Washington to help build out its civilian nuclear program. Both demands are viewed as daunting obstacles in political circles. And so this was back on March 9th, 2023. And I know that a lot might change because of the current state of Israel and what is going on with Hamas, and all of these things have changed so quickly over there with these attacks that Israel has had. And it makes me wonder if some of these attacks aren't because of this agreement that the United States was trying to help Saudi Arabia and Israel come together to have. But I still want to go ahead and show this to you because I believe that there is something to this, to what we are seeing, the result of this war that is breaking out in Israel right now in the Middle East. So back on March 9th, 2023, Saudi Arabia says it will normalize ties with Israel if the United States provides it with security pledges and helps build out its civilian nuclear program, the Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday. The two Saudi demands are viewed as daunting obstacles to a deal, as some Washington lawmakers will likely oppose those measures, the report said. The terms of security guarantee Saudi Arabia has asked before and been rejected by presidents from both parties. And U.S. and Israel officials fear that helping Saudi Arabia with a nuclear program for non-military uses could lead it to develop its own nuclear weapon and spark an arms race with Iran. The nuclear issue is one of, if not the biggest challenge for Israel, and one of Israel's challenge for Israel, and Israelis should debate whether it's worth the price for peace. And so we're just going to look down here. It starts talking about such an agreement, however, has become a priority for Biden's administration, which wants a diplomatic victory according to the people involved in the discussions. We see that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is actually eager for this deal, or he was before these Hamas attacks. I'm sure he is even more eager now because this was to come against the nuclear plan of Iran that they have. They go on to say that Saudi Arabia has improved its security ties with Israel in recent years due to the Iranian threat. It has also tactically supported the agreements with Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Still, it has been reluctant to openly sign an agreement with Israel, fearing a backlash from other Arab states and its own population. So now I'm sure that the pressure is even more higher. I haven't recently heard any more about this agreement because everything is just over the attacks right now, and the United States sending in their military and all of that to try to help Israel. So I'm not sure where all of this stands as it is right now, but it is very interesting that this was being looked at before these attacks on Israel. And since we're talking about this, I want to go ahead and throw this article in here. It's from 17 days ago, but it is a Newsweek article, and the heading is Joe Biden overturned Trump policy to give Palestinians $235 million in aid. Soon after the Islamist militant group Hamas launched its attack against Israel, a number of right-wing figures suggested that funding approved by the Biden administration may have played a role in the deadly violence. The White House National Security Council has already dismissed suggestions that the $6 billion in frozen Iranian money, which had been freed up in exchange for the release of 5 American detainees, was used by Iran, which supports Hamas, to help plot the attacks that broke out on Saturday. Republican Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn suggested that a 2021 decision to provide $235 million in aid to the Palestinians may have also helped fund Hamas, a group that is designated as a terrorist organization by the United States and the European Union. On April 2021, the Biden administration approved plans to provide $235 million in aid to Palestinians, which included $150 million in humanitarian assistance for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency and $75 million in economic and development assistance in the West Bank and Gaza. The move was a reversal from what occurred in the previous administration when Donald Trump blocked nearly all aid to UNRWA after it severed ties with the Palestinian Authority in 2018. Blackburn, a loyal Trump supporter, suggested in a series of posts on X, formerly Twitter, that there was a link between the incursion from Hamas on Saturday and the aid relief promised to Palestine. President Trump cut U.S. aid to Palestine. President Biden reversed this decision and sent hundreds of millions of dollars to Palestine, Blackburn wrote. Biden administration officials are now saying they didn't think pouring millions of dollars into Hamas areas would fuel terrorism, she said in a subsequent post. The lies keep piling up. Blackburn called for the Biden administration to halt all aid to the Palestinian Authority and the Iran-backed terrorist group Hamas in the wake of the attack, which has left at least 700 people dead in Israel and a further 400 dead in Gaza, according to the Associated Press, with thousands wounded on each side. And again, this was 17 days ago. More things have progressed since then, but I just think that it's interesting that Joe Biden's administration, sent $235 million to the Palestinian territory. But look here, he couldn't even visit Palestine, Ohio when they had that huge chemical spill with the train derailment, right? And so then it goes on to say down here that Austria and Germany confirmed on Monday that they would be suspending aid to Palestinians in response to Hamas attacks, with the European Union foreign minister to hold an emergency meeting in Brussels on Tuesday to discuss further development assistance. So even the EU is saying, hey, well, wait a minute, we can't fund the Palestinians where the Hamas attacks are happening, right? And so in a statement, Trump described the Hamas attacks as a disgrace and said that Israel has every right to defend itself. And he said, sadly, American tax dollars help fund these attacks, which many reports are saying came from the Biden administration, Trump said. So I think that it's interesting how America is doing backdoor deals with Iran. We are funding, Palestinian, supposedly humanitarian acts that could have resulted in us using our tax dollars to fund these very attacks that now we're having to send our military to protect Israel from. It just seems just like pure insanity, doesn't it? And like I mentioned earlier, Israel has been invited to the COP28 conference. So let's take a look at this article. And so this is an article from the Jerusalem Post. Israel to bring 1,000-person delegation to the COP28 climate conference in Dubai. And the date of this article is July 3rd, 2023. Israel will invest NIS $8 million to bring a delegation of 1,000 people and more than 100 Israeli climate and related technology companies to Dubai at the end of November for the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP28, according to the Foreign Ministry. On Monday, representatives from the public and business sectors, academia, and civil society gathered at the Foreign Ministry in Jerusalem to discuss ideas and potential collaborations before COP28, which runs from November 30th to December 12th in Dubai. Some 80,000 people from 198 countries are expected to attend the event. The Economy Ministry is leading the selection of 30 companies, including many startups, to present their ideas in the Israeli Pavilion, which will be marketed under the tagline Climate of Innovation. More than 100 companies will travel to Dubai with the Israel Export Institute and participate in meetings and side events. Throughout the 2-week conference, Israel will participate in around 70 events, explained Maya Kadash, Israel's national coordinator for COP28, including some events on the main stage. The country will also invest heavily in public relations. This year's conference comes as the world is starting to feel the impact of climate change, from warmer ocean waters and marine heat waves to extreme weather events and more. And so then they go on with their spiel of the consequences for climate change and all of this. But I do want to point out down here that according to the foreign minister, Eli Cohen, Israel is home to around 700 climate tech companies. Now, I do find that very interesting. I did not realize that Israel was so involved with climate change as the rest of the world. So I found that very interesting, this article. And again, I'll link this article down below if y'all want to go and read it later. But it sounds like the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is very, very much involved in this climate change, and he is very excited to actually be now invited to join the COP28 United Nations conference. So what should we expect from this United Nations conference? Let's take a look at this article. So this is an article from Greenlee. What should we expect from the COP28 summit in Dubai? And this was written June 22, 2023. And they say on November 30th, 70,000 participants made of the heads of state, government officials, climate experts, and leaders of global industry sectors will descend upon Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, to attend the COP28, the 28th session of the Conference of Parties. It is a chance for global leaders to discuss and find solutions to climate change, the biggest challenge of this century. However, the conference is already off to a rocky start with the appointment of Sultan Al Jaber as COP28 president designate. The fact that Sultan Al Jaber is an Emirati minister of industry and CEO of Abu Dhabi's national oil company has garnered criticism from climate activists and sparked calls for him to relinquish his role. So that is interesting. So this goes on to tell you what is the COP28 conference, and it just tells you that they call it the Conference of Parties. It is a United Nations climate change conference. They've been having this since 1995, and they hold it every year to discuss and find solutions for climate change, basically. So I'll link this video as well. But one thing that I wanted to point out from this article that I found interesting is if we remember back, I know things move so fast, we have so much news just thrown at us, but if we remember back, they had a Paris Agreement. And this Paris Agreement was back in 2015. This landmark agreement was signed by 195 parties out of 199, and they agreed to reduce global levels of greenhouse gas emissions. And so they are trying, get this, to reduce the global surface temperature below 2 degrees Celsius to prevent dangerous climate change. And so this Paris Agreement was the thing that started off this whole ordeal with this climate change. And so we need to not forget about that and who was in office and the leaders that have been behind this climate change. because I believe that climate change is a vehicle that they are going to use to usher in a one world global government. I believe that. I see it all the time with everything that has to deal with these global leaders. It's all on the guise of, climate change. You have the Pope involved. You have China somehow involved, even though they are not really participating. They're somehow involved. And if you really look at even, the electric cars, the batteries and the tires are bad for the environment. Did you know that tires are actually carbon? And so this whole electric car climate change, I'm sorry if you buy into it, but I just do not. I think that this is the vehicle that they are going to use to usher in a one world global government. We've had natural disasters for decades. We've had carbon on this planet, I believe, since God put life on this planet. And you actually need carbon for life. And so if you remove the carbon off of the planet, you have no life. And we need to keep that in the back of our mind. What really are they at war with? Humanity, mammals? What is their goal in this fight of climate change? We already see that the powers that be, they do not value human life. They do not value humanity in any way. I mean, just look at abortion. And so to me, I do not buy into all of this. But I'll link this article so that y'all can go back and read all of this if you want. But it kind of goes back over these different conferences that they have had over these last few years and what they have been wanting to come against. And then it goes into, the COP28 in Dubai that is fixing to happen. So what are the leaders of the UK and the United States doing right now leading up to this United Nations conference? Let's take a look at what King Charles and Joe Biden are up to right now. So this is from the whitehouse.gov, and this is back from July 10th, 2023. Joint fact sheet: President Biden and His Majesty King Charles III meet with leading philanthropists and financiers to catalyze climate finance. Today, President Biden and His Majesty King Charles III met at Windsor Castle with 23 lending philanthropists and financiers to help catalyze finance to supporting emerging markets and developing countries in tackling climate crisis. The gathering followed the Climate Finance Mobilization Forum, which was convened by the UK Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary Grant Shapps and U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, and inspired by the work of His Majesty the King. Today's gathering builds a long-standing UK-U.S. efforts to turbocharge the net zero resilient transition already underway in developing and emerging economies on the road to COP28. The forum brought together key players to identify how we could go further, faster to mobilize the private investment needed to expand clean and renewable energy across the globe, reduce both potent CO2 and non-CO2 emissions, halt deforestation, and restore forest and build resilience to a changing climate. Recognizing the scale and urgency of the climate crisis, the gathering emphasized the importance of partnership across governments, philanthropies, and investors, given that no single actor can mobilize finance on a scale required by acting alone. The scale of this transition requires trillions in private investment in addition to the public funds we are spending. It is also one of the biggest investment opportunities in history. Private sector financial institutions and philanthropists announced a range of new investment platforms and initiatives during the event that demonstrated their commitment to concrete actions to finance efforts in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. These efforts will help reduce emissions and boost climate resilience, while generating jobs in local communities and growing their economies. And so they just go through here how they're spending and raising their billions and what they're wanting to use it on. And so I will link this article down below if you want to look at it later as well. And that is not all King Charles has been up to. Take a look at this. Now, this article I find interesting. King Charles holds roundtable climate talks with COP28. And it is an article from June 28, 2023. King Charles III held roundtable talks at London's Guildhall with key leaders on climate action as part of the lead up to the COP28 summit opening in the UAE in November. During London Climate Action Week, King Charles presided over the inauguration of the countdown clock marking the deadline set in the 2015 Paris Agreement. There is the 2015 Paris Agreement again. Isn't that interesting? To limit global temperature rises to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And so they go on to talk about this climate clock that King Charles has been involved in. And here is a picture of this climate clock. They say that there are 6 years, 24 days, and 49 minutes, 40 seconds. Isn't that interesting? Everything seems like it's in groups of 7, doesn't it? This article just kind of talks about this global clock and what King Charles is up to. And I'm not really going to read this whole thing, but you're welcome to go and click the link in the description of this video and read this whole thing if you want to. But it's very interesting that you have now King Charles, since Queen Elizabeth has passed. You have him, you have Pope, you have the United States, you're now having Israel involved. There's so many facets coming together. It is just unbelievable. And it all is circling around climate change. And on top of all of that, Joe Biden on August 7, 2023 called climate change an existential threat because of recent weather events. So in this article, Biden calls climate change an existential threat after weeks of disastrous weather. And this article is back from August 9, 2023. And it says, on the heels of devastating weather across the U.S., President Joe Biden on Wednesday emphasized the existential threat of climate change, but dodged questions on whether he would declare a climate national emergency. And I just think that that's amazing that they're talking about a climate national emergency. I've done some videos a while back on World Health Organization and how they were trying to get countries to sign these treaties and waivers where they would actually bypass constitutions of countries and dissolve the sovereignty of nations in the case of national emergency. So now we see that climate change can now be a national emergency. And we see down here that they're saying that climate activists have been pushing Biden's administration throughout his first term to declare a national climate emergency. And I just find that very interesting that they're saying the greatest threat to the world right now is climate change. It isn't World War III that, all of these nation leaders are pushing forward. They're almost provoking one another to get into this world war. You see China with Taiwan. You see, Russia with Ukraine. You see Hamas and Iran with Israel. You're seeing all of these different things taking place. And it's like they're provoking one another to World War III, where we have nuclear weapons. But that is not the main threat for humanity. Climate change is. I just find that very interesting. And it just seems like, we just throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is no common sense anymore. And they think that we're blind, that we cannot see that climate change is the vehicle that they are going to use, that Satan is going to use for a one world government. And so I'm not going to read this whole article or anything, but I will link it down below if you want to go back and read this article later. And 2 days prior to Joe Biden saying this, an article was published that the UAE signed a pact to develop a national system for carbon credits. They hope to achieve their goals by 2050. Here is the article. I'll put it up on the screen for you. And looky there, the COP28 is mentioned. This article is the UAE Ministry of Climate Change signs pact to develop national system for carbon credits. And we see that they are wanting to have this done, like I mentioned earlier, by 2050. So that's very interesting. This article was written August 7th, 2023. It reads, the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment has signed a preliminary agreement with a UAE-based industrial innovation group and Venom Foundation to establish a national system for carbon credits using blockchain technology. And so I just find this interesting that they're talking about a national system for carbon credits. The pact in the run-up to the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai in November and December is in line with the UAE's stricter carbon emission reduction targets this decade and achieving its goals of climate neutrality by 2050, a ministry statement said on Monday. The collaboration aims to reduce emissions and enhance sustainable agriculture, environmental health, and biodiversity in the UAE. The parties aim to develop a system that will produce the highest levels of transparency, reliability, efficiency, and security in managing, issuing, transferring, calculating, and accurate tracking of carbon credits, it said. The UAE believes in its ability to make a difference in this field and has pledged through the third update of its second nationally determined contributions to reduce its emissions by 40% this decade compared to a business-as-usual scenario, an increase of 9% over its previous pledge. So this goes on to talk about these carbon credits, also known as carbon offsets, are permits that allow companies to emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. The funds from the sale of the credits are then used to finance climate action projects that would not otherwise get off the ground. So basically, they're wanting these companies to buy carbon credits to finance their climate action projects. I just find that interesting. Is this about climate change, or is this about big companies being able to buy carbon credits and small companies not being able to buy and afford these carbon credits? And us being consumers, what are we going to do with our carbon footprint? I used to sell on Etsy, and, Etsy is saying, how they are reducing their carbon footprint. And I heard that before long, these third-party sellers like Etsy and Amazon are going to start requiring the people who sell on their platforms to have some kind of business plan where they are eliminating their carbon footprint. Just the other day, our postal service sent me a little post note telling me how they are eliminating their carbon footprint. And so it's all very interesting how everybody is eliminating their own carbon footprint, right? And how blockchain is involved. And blockchain, I've never heard anything good when it comes to blockchain. You can look them up. And this whole thing just seems like a web of greed, and none of it is to promote health and sustainability of the human race. And if you look, we're getting close. We will be in 2024 and not very long. And, they've got 2030 goals and 2050 goals, and that's not very far away when we look at how fast time goes. And so it is very disturbing reading these things. And again, I'm not going to go through this whole article, but I will link it down in the description below if you want to read this one later. And recently, Al Jaber, the president of the COP28 conference, visited Brazil's EPA. So let's take a look at what they talked about on August 16, 2023. New climate finance framework needs to unlock more private capital. A new framework for climate finance needs to be comprehensive and unlock a supercharged stream of private capital. COP28 President designate Dr. Sultan Al Jaber has said. His remarks came during a meeting of the independent high-level expert group on climate finance, who gathered at Abu Dhabi's Global Market on Tuesday and Wednesday to discuss setting up a new framework for international climate finance. The fresh roadmap will include addressing debt distress in vulnerable countries and the role of the private sector in delivering increased finances. The attendees said that private finance flows need to grow faster to meet the $2.4 trillion in total investment estimated to be required annually by 2030 to address climate change in emerging markets and developing economies. For too long, climate finance has divided the international community and held back progress in tackling climate change and supporting countries most impacted by it. So they are getting private companies to come in and finance this so that they can get countries, your third world countries on board. And that is the main goal, I think, for this COP28 is to get all this money. And that's why they're having Israel come in, and Israel is bringing all of these companies, and they're going to try to get these companies to finance all of these things that they are wanting to get done globally. And so again, it just talks about when it is and where it's going to be and how they are trying to fast track everything and pull in a bunch of finances to fund all of their stuff. And it says that the climate finance framework will be designed to guide all institutions, including UN agencies, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. So you have these huge financial institutions that are going to be involved in this as well. And, it sounds like they are wanting to take these finances and they're wanting to emerge these markets and develop economies. And I think that they have a global view, obviously, here. And I just don't see how anyone at this point cannot see that this climate change is bringing in a global economy, and you have to have that for a one world government. So to me, it just seems like this whole thing is just screaming one world government, one world economy, everything coming together as one. They're wanting to take the big world and make it small, And here again, they're saying they need investment in renewable energies, and they need them to double more than $4 trillion by the end of the decade to meet the net zero emission target by 2050. And, it just makes me think zero emissions, there's no way that's even possible. These big companies might be able to buy these carbon credits, but they're still going to be operating a lot in the same sense that they are right now. None of this makes any sense when you try to look at this logically. It just doesn't add up and make any sense. And so to make this video not too long, I'm not going to finish reading all of this, but again, I'll put this article down in the description below if you want to go back and read this one later. And last but not least, Pope Francis is once again involved in this climate change conference because he wants to see an interfaith and intercultural dialogue pavilion at the conference so that they can have a dialogue between religions and cultures to highlight the crucial role of religious perspectives and values in addressing the climate crisis. And if you didn't see the Pope's role in the last conference with the new climate commandments they went up on Mount Sinai to get, don't forget to check out the video I mentioned earlier, and I'll put a link to the end screen of this video for you. Let's take a look at this article. And this is an article from Vatican News. World Religion to Share Values and Knowledge at COP28. Pope Francis receives the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Elders and the special representative of the UAE presidency to discuss the crucial contributions of faith communities in the upcoming COP28 conference in Dubai. And so this article is talking about Pope Francis. He's meeting privately with these people, and they are bringing in religious institutions and religious leaders to come to the COP28 conference. And you just have to start asking yourself, like, why is the Pope and these world leaders and all of these things are all coming together for one agenda? And like I said, this video is going to be too long, so I'm not going to read all of this, but it's something that we've kind of already talked about. And so I will put a link. If you want to go back and read this article later, you can. But it's all very interesting how all of these entities are coming together globally for the one purpose of climate change. As you can see, climate change is a vehicle that is being used to bring all governments together, which I believe will usher in a one world government that is mentioned in the Bible. We are seeing these foundations being laid right now. I think that it is important to keep our eye on what they are doing because this does go hand in hand with Bible prophecy. Today's governments are wanting us to abstain from meat, just as the Bible predicted, abstain from marriage and having children, and they are doing all of it in the name of climate change. There are too many people on the earth, they tell us. The animals are putting out too much carbon, which is bad for climate change. Last I checked, all mammals breathe out CO2, which is carbon. So basically, their mission is to end life of all mammals on this earth, meaning humans and animals. We have got to wake up to their plan and what they are trusting in to save this earth that our Bible clearly says will be destroyed, and God will create a new heaven and a new earth. I want to share a scripture with you that I read the other day. It has been on my mind here lately. It is Isaiah chapter 31, verses 1 through 3. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses and trust in chariots, because they are many, and in horsemen, because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord. Yet he also is wise, and will bring evil, and will not call back his words, but will arise against the house of the evildoers, and against the help of them that work iniquity. Now the Egyptians are men and not God, and their horses flesh and not spirit. When the Lord shall stretch out his hand, both he that helpeth shall fall, and he that hopeth shall fall down, and they all shall fail together. We see the governments and many of the people today are doing this same thing. They are trusting in armies and money and the works of their hands instead of seeking God and spiritual things. May we as believers never forget that our God is of the Spirit, and if we are in Christ Jesus, we are now under the law of the Spirit. May we never forget that all these things around us are of the flesh, and we cannot trust in them, but we can only trust in the Lord, because he will never leave us and never forsake us. Amen. I hope that you have found this video to be informative. And if you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and share it so that we can let others know what is really going on behind the scenes. I hope to see you Tuesday at 11 a.m. U.S. Central Standard Time for Bible study. Until next time, take care and stay in the Word.